because we believe everything is interrelated, and it really needs to be, because if you think about it, the car has aptly become what we, and I don't know how to do this clicker, so which one am I using? Is it the first one? Not so bright today. Oh, there we go, I got it. So, as I say, the car has aptly become an extension of our personal being, and it really is, if you think about it, it's everything we do. We want to be connected all the time, and we don't want to be not connected from our car. So it's really interesting when we think about that, because the car will continue to become more connected because we want it to take our home experience wherever we go. Everything we do. Because, and you know why that's happened? Steve Jobs. The moment he created the iPhone in 2007, that changed our life, changed the way everything we do. So now we have this, we expect to have that same experience of connectivity from our personal lives to our professional lives. We don't want to be disconnected. And the sad part is we don't want to be disconnected anywhere. Now I'm going to ask you this really important question. How many in this room have a smartphone? Okay? How many of you take this smartphone on vacation? Okay? How many of you take that smartphone and have it next to your nightstand at night? Okay, now the question's going to get tough. How many of you taking that smartphone to the restroom? See, some of you are going to be honest, and I will bet the number is much higher, but you don't want the person next to you to know it. Because you become addicted. That same addiction that you have to that smartphone is now extending to your car. It's an extension. I interviewed this great reporter the other day. I interview a lot of reporters. I do the Peggy Smedley Show, which is an internet radio show, and I do it every Tuesday. And I have a great relationship with other mainstream media because I spend a lot of time educating the mainstream media about all these things that you're involved in. So they come on my show, from the Wall Street Journal to the Consumer Reports to the Detroit News, everybody. And I had a great woman from Auto 123 on my show, and she talked about our smartphone is like our fifth appendage. I love that line because it's really true. That is what's happened. We're so addicted, but that same addiction is how we want it in our cars. We want that same thing with us all the time. So if we think about it, but it's not just about that, but we want that same experience now to what Brian was saying. We want green. So we also want everything we do, it's not just that we want that phone, we want that car experience, but we want to be clean. We want a green socially. We want to be socially responsible. So that car that we have and everything we have, we want to seek all the continuous benefits of everything we want with that networking. So we want to think about everything. And Brian was so right. I was like, wow, we should tag team and do our talks together with Brian, because everything he was saying, I truly believe, because that's the environment that we live in every day. Because we think about that connection from our home to our doctors to everything we're thinking about and doing. And it's interesting because it moves beyond the traditional experience that we think. Think about what's happened now. If we think about in-car connectivity, 5 years ago, we weren't even thinking about what we have today in our cars. We weren't thinking about bringing social media in our cars. We weren't thinking about all the things that we have, all the apps. We weren't thinking about Google Maps. Those things we weren't even thinking about, but we've only just begun to think of what's coming next. So the experiences that we have are changing every day, and it goes beyond the basics, but it goes into much needed information, and this is what I like. We're moving into this world now where we want to be connected to insurance providers, our OEMs, our healthcare providers. That's what's really interesting, and we're going to talk more about that. Retailers, we want financial institutions. I talked about our homes, but even the utilities, our smart grids. All of these things so that we have a healthier, safer, connected environment. And all of this makes us smarter. We want technology so we can interact and exchange information. That's what's so powerful about this. And I get really excited. I'm like up here and I'm getting all pumped up the more I talk to you about it. Because that's where our world is becoming, this connected world in a way that we never dreamed possible only a few years ago. Think about it. Look at, in 2007, how our world has changed since Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. That's only a few years ago. It's not that long ago, but it's completely changed from that smartphone to how it's changed our cars. And that's really what's happened. But we really don't make that connection as much as we should. And that's exactly what's happened. So it's really interesting because it helps us provide this really interesting way of this. I look at it as this world of that it's making us safer, it's making us more comfortable, more convenient, and I think I always say it's a connected world, which is what we call our magazine, Connected World, because that's exactly what we have, this great world that's all about it. And our car, as I look at it, is this information hub that brings us all together in what we're doing. And it's kind of interesting because I wanted to kind of look in both ways because I can see the screens. But I put this video together because I want to bring you back to the day of when you think about your car. Now this is kind of interesting because I want you, and many of you are going to go, I remember that day. It was the day of the hot rod. And now you go back to the day of what today is. So I want you to enjoy this video because we had some fun creating it. And I want to bring you back to your youth, to today, and show you how things have changed. About this. What happened? Yesterday we talked about speed, power, performance, right? When you bought a car and you looked at those hot rods, I want you to be honest now. How many, when you bought a car back in the day, is that the way you bought a car? Think about it, right? Raise your hands, right? That's really what it was. But think about the car buyer today. They don't go into a lot looking for a car based on speed, power, and performance. What's today's buyer? Today's buyer is about convenience, safety, infotainment. That's how it's changed. But here's the interesting thing. When you go in there, how many people really know what they're buying? That's the interesting thing about the technology. They don't really understand. They look for it. We have a generation of people who want it, but they're not going in there and saying, I want, this amazing turbo whatever under the hood, and talk about that. That's not the way they're buying cars today. They're buying about, I want safety, I want infotainment, I want to know all the things, 4G, LTE, that's what we're talking about in a car today. Because, I want to make sure I'm not slapping my kid in the back seat, that's what they're saying. Honest to goodness, that's the way people are talking. I want my kid to be entertained in that back seat. Now we're going to talk about driver distraction, that's a whole other discussion. But that's what's happening in today's car buyer, right? That's what they're saying. It's a really changed world, the way we're buying a car. People want to know that they can use the car when they're in it, to know that they can shut the lights off in their home. It's a connection and an extension of that they know the kids are safe. They want to know everything they're doing once they leave that home. It's the same thing that they can do from their car to their home. That's the way you're buying a car today. But think about even more. Think about this if your car. What about a car that you're thinking about now on the safety side is a pre-crash system, otherwise known as, many of you heard this, right? A forward collision system, right? You all know this, the safety system. That's what we have now. We have all these safety systems and warning systems. You use radar in the cars, right? We're using all that. Cameras, sensors. You all know this. I'm telling you, I'm speaking to a group that understands this better than most. Those are what we're looking, so that you can prevent an imminent crash, right? It has that warning system. That's the main thing that are in cars today. That's what we're talking about. But what about this? What about when we have a car can send a message when something happens about data about the crash, so that we can send EMTs there location of the crash so that they can respond immediately. That's what's happening in our cars right now. Those are the most important things, right? So they can assist in an accident. How about this? What about an automated highway driving assist systems to incorporate adaptive cruise systems? Those are important too, right? We're looking at those so that you can have a safe distance between vehicles. We're talking about vehicle to vehicle, right? Aren't those the things we're looking at today? That's what's happening. What about lane control? So you can have safe distance in lanes. We're talking about all of those. So all of these systems that we're talking ensure safe vehicles. This is what we're talking about, is changing the systems today. And that's all starting to happen. We talk about vehicle to infrastructure. All of those things are happening and we're seeing it. All of these things we're talking about is mobility to the cloud, right? We're talking about all of this happening, and we're talking about advanced navigation systems. We're talking about video streaming, wireless charging, and EVs. We heard Brian talking about all the things that we're talking about when we're charging our vehicles in our home. All of these amazing things are happening. Autonomous vehicles. Google's talking about it all the time. All of these things are happening, but the thing that we have to talk about most is what's the most things we happen, what do we need, what's too much, and what will change the way we, the consumer, need to have it, what we should have, and where have we gone too far. And these are the really interesting things that I talk about as the market is getting really large. So I think the market is really huge right now. We have a huge market. The market growth is immense, and the potential is very large for it. But here's what I think is the most amazing thing. When we look at all of this in the space, we think about what are the unlimited opportunities that we have. We have a lot of challenges though, and here's what the thing that we need to think about. When we put all these great opportunities in these vehicles and the things that we can do, what are we leading? Do we lead to more driver distraction? Brian and I were talking about this earlier. The more things we put in the vehicle leads to cognitive distraction. That's the thing we don't. Remember when we first had a car, we had knobs for the radio, right? But now when we put all these things in the car, how do we know what's too much? Now, I'll bet most of you, when you think about this, what's the number one thing today that leads to driver distraction? Can anybody answer that question? I know most of you are going to get this wrong. Texting, but that is not correct. It was. Do you know what the number one thing is today? Surfing the web. Now that's interesting, isn't it? And here's the best thing. It's not under the 18-year-olds that's doing it, it's people over 30. Frightening, isn't that? Because everybody thinks they can just do it and it's not going to be them because they're in control. It's not. It's that other person that's on the road next to you that's not paying attention, that actually you think you can do it, but you have to think about the person next to you. So there's a lot of things to think about when we put all these things in our car. So it's really amazing when we think about it. So there's a lot of challenges that we have to deal with, but there's a mix of players out there. And one of the things I want to talk about today is that we have a greater need to work together to make all this happen. And when I talk about the players, there's from OEMs, there's the consumers, there's the service providers. And I thought what I would do today is really talk about the 10 kind of drivers that we have to think about. And most of you are really good at understanding the technology side, but I thought it would be interesting to kind of address what are the things that all the players have to come together and the things we have to think about. So let's start kind of talking about them right now, because I think we're facing what I call like a tipping point right now, looking at all this technology, because we, as the consumer, are demanding a lot. And now that's a challenge because we want it all. We want to be connected to our home, we want to be connected to our doctors, we want to be connected to our fitness devices, we want to be connected to our energy, and this is what's changing. And as a result, we are at the biggest challenges of what's ever happened with the connected world that we've ever been. And so there's a lot of things coming together when we look at the connected car. So I thought it would be good to look at what they are. So let's talk about right now the life cycle of the vehicle. So as we look at it, cars take longer to develop than the smartphone. So if we say right now the smartphone, to upgrade a smartphone happens pretty quickly. Most of you, when you get a smartphone, how often do you change your smartphone? Somebody give me a number. Every other year? Every year? How often do you change your phone? Every year you change your phone. How often do you think it takes to change your car? What's the life cycle of a car? Anybody know? Traditionally, it's been 10 years, actually, to change a car. Now, the way they have to do it, in order to try to be competitive, they've dropped it down to 5 years to try to change it. How do you do it then if you want the same apps from your smartphone into your car? How do you do that? How does the car company do that? Big challenges, right? So that's what they have to consider now. If we are the consumer, we want the same apps in our phone, in our cars. Car companies and the OEMs have a challenge here in the life cycle of the car. So those are the things that we're looking at, because they have to look like that, because they constantly want new features, operating system upgrades, and all these new apps. So there's a big challenge there that they have to think about. And that's an industry now that is really aggressively saying, look, I want all this. So it's something that has to be addressed. So let's talk about safety systems. They're getting better. They're more complex, right? It's really interesting. But here's an interesting part that I'll tell you. It's an interesting quote that Scott McNeely said this back in the year 2000. It was an interesting quote. Did you know that he called the car the internet server on wheels? He was a genius back in 2000. How come we didn't know that? I was like, wow, I would have loved to have interviewed him for that line. Because it's true. We have all these amazing things, and we're looking at safety systems, apps. He even called it back in 2000. That's amazing to me when I think about it. So when we look at all this, we have safety laws that have to dictate connectivity right now. There's no question we have to address that. But we do. We have on-call, and then overseas they have e-call, right? And those are regulatory things. And those things are great because you hit a button, emergency response people come, but we have bigger issues because we have to address the EMTs. How are they going to come? What's going to happen when all of them come and they look at things and they respond? But how do you address it even further? How do you take it to the next level that we can be safer in the cars? And we've done a very good job with the safety systems. That's one thing you have to say that the car companies have done, is they've really stepped up with the safety systems in the cars. But let's now look at the next level. OEMs need to have a lot more mobile partners. That's really what's happened here, and we've seen it right now. We've seen a good job because the carriers in the automotive industry have to work together. They have disparate objectives, there's no question about it, but we've seen it. Sprint has been working, they have the Uconnect, they've been working with Sprint Velocity, they've been working with the carrier, they've been working with Chrysler. AT&T has been working with GM. You've been seeing Verizon work with Mercedes-Benz. So we're seeing some great partnerships in the car companies, in their systems. We're even seeing in the UK, which has been really great, they're looking at white spaces. Now, we always talk about spectrum issues because, the more apps that are going into cars, we're going to have connectivity, and we always complain about our smartphones already, right? So they're looking at white spaces. So in the UK, they're working on, British Telecom is working on how do you look at that, how will you be able to get things with messages and things like that. So it's kind of interesting that they're doing some things. And they'll look at traffic congestion and things like that. So I think that's a great idea that they're doing. But there's a lot of issues there and how they're going to work together, continue to grow. Tech-savvy dealers. This, to me, is probably the biggest problem that we see right now in the industry, and I'll tell you why. Because car dealers have no knowledge, lack knowledge completely when it comes to looking at which I call the cockpit, the dashboard. They sell a product, they sell these cars, and when somebody buys a car and it goes off the lot, they really do not understand the advanced technology. They don't even understand how it works with your smartphone, and how to tether it. They really do not know what they're selling. And that's really the biggest problem. They need to educate buyers about the technology. They need to explain what is in the dashboard, and they really need to do a better job. And they can improve the relationship with their customers, those consumers, and that's not happening. So there's a huge opportunity here for a business and better relationship that's going on. Let's talk about it's not about just selling cars, and I think that's an issue here because I don't think people understand that day of just selling a car and the relationship's gone has to go away too. I think what we have is you have mobility, connectivity, and I think we're talking about green and EVs that Brian just said as well. What about the thing that was also out there that you have to think about, car sharing services? It's really, really interesting because if you know about Zipcar, that changed the way things are, and that was a big thing because Avis Budget Group acquired Zipcar, and that goes to tell you how things are changing. They really saw the big deal when that happened. And I think that says a lot what's going to change, because you're going to see more of those car sharing services. Because people maybe don't want to buy cars, they want to share cars. And I think you're going to see a lot of that as well. So I think you're going to see that's going to change the business model going forward. Okay, this is an interesting I want to share. What's better or safer? How about this one? Let's talk about this. Built-in or brought-in connections. Now there's a big debate on this, because how will the connection be made over the web? You know, if it's built-in is better over the web, there's no question, because consumers like to tether their smartphones via Bluetooth. But smartphone to the car via Bluetooth using your USB or whatever that you have, that's going to be an issue, because consumers like to bring in their own playlists, their own contacts. But what's going to be better here? Are we safer or not? What's going to be the issue? We have regulations right now that you can't bring your smartphone into the car because of distracted driving. So what are those issues going to be? Those are the kind of things we're going to have to think about. Because do you bring everything in over the web? Consumers don't like that. They want to have their smartphone in there and be able to tether it. What's going to happen? That's a big debate right now. So there's a lot of discussion about that. So we're kind of saying, well, what do we do? Are you going to be able to do that? Consumers going to dictate? They kind of dictate a lot of this technology. There's a lot of regulatory issues. So the OEMs have to fight it out in Washington. So it's a big deal. How about this one? Driverless or self-driving cars. Kind of creeps me out a little bit. So I saw a bunch of cars down the road with nobody behind the wheel. Kind of go, do you want that? I don't know. So who wants it? Here's the big one you have to think about. This is a good one for you guys. Who's going to pay for it? It's kind of an interesting thing. It's another device to your mobile bill, right? People don't like it. It's a problem. What about the data charge, roaming? It's things people don't think about right now, but it's an issue, and consumers are going to be concerned once it happens to them. You know, but the interesting thing on the other side, it's a new business model. Everybody loves business models when there's new revenue to be had for them. You know, and it's interesting. I have some numbers here. ABI Research predicts the first driverless vehicles that will be on the market will be about 10 million robotic vehicles shipping by 2032. So I find that really interesting because it's going to be kind of interesting when we look at the total numbers. But on the other side, look, there's a lot of legislation to adoption with high costs and a lack of legislation overall with this right now. Nobody's had it out there, nobody's really talked about it, but you know that's coming. Because right now it's all idealistic, but once it hits the streets, legislation's going to come. And that's really what the next thing is. How am I doing on time? Fine? Okay. So let's talk about apps, because I always love to talk about apps because this is the big thing. Everybody wants the apps. This is where consumers and everybody gets excited. This is where you all get excited, and I think it's a big one. But you can't get enough of them. There are hundreds of thousands of apps in the smartphone. You go to the Apple store and you go crazy. You can play there all day. Angry Birds go crazy. Everybody wants Angry Birds in the car next. I mean, I don't know. But is it right to have hundreds of thousands of apps in your car, in the dashboard, like your smartphone? You know? What about the security issues? The number one concern is drivers are concerned someone's going to hack into their car and control their steering, their braking. What happens there? Is it going to happen? Can it happen? We've seen an article in Forbes already that scared people that that's what's going to happen. To programmers prove that it can be done in a lab environment. Well, can it happen when you're driving on the road? Those are issues that are being, discussed. But here's the bigger one. Who maintains those apps? Are it the developers? Is it the OEMs? And it's kind of discussions that have to be brought up. Now, the Car Connectivity Consortium announced a standard as kind of for developers as a one-stop shop. Should that be done? Should everybody have to belong to that standard? I don't know. Then there's other things like Parkopedia that came out with a parking app. What about those kind of apps? We're going to see a lot more of those, help you find your best parking spot. I mean, there are some really good ideas for apps. You can't find a parking spot and use that app, because then it tells you where you're going to go. I mean, there are some apps that make a lot of sense versus Angry Bird apps. So those are the discussions we have to decide. What are the right apps and what are not the right apps? So I think it's kind of an interesting thing. We're actually we have a conference in February. We're taking our Connected World conference and we're putting it right inside the Chicago Auto Show. And we're doing a contest, and we have investors coming, and they're going to be looking at the best apps. And we're working, I don't know if any of you have heard of Smart Things. They have Smart Things as a shop, and we're doing a contest with them, and the winner will appear on the cover of Connected World magazine. And you can develop apps that for anything, for the home or whatever. And the idea is to see who can be most creative on these apps. And it's really great to be able to do these pitch contests because it helps to understand what are the right apps and what are the apps that are just for fun and creating things to improve our life. And that's what we're trying to do is sometimes Angry Birds are fun, but then are there other things that improve the way, we can reach a doctor in case of an emergency or things like that. So it's neat to be able to do new things, but we have to decide what's going to help us and what's going to distract us. So it's kind of an interesting thing. The next thing we have, what about new features? We've seen right now new features in GPS. The idea of getting us away from traffic flows. Those features are really great. You're late for a meeting, you know where to avoid traffic so you can make that meeting. Those are really great. We've seen hands-free calling systems, so those things are coming. Driving systems, self-diagnosing problems with the car, we're seeing a lot of those. Surround sound kind of systems in the car that are helping. Even the kind of things that are outside sensors that tell you if there's problems with your car on the outside, we're seeing a lot of those kind of things. And that's great. Those are new things that are helping, again, with safety. Those are kind of things that we're looking at. And even a rear view kind of imminent, if you've got a collision on the rear side of your car, that that it can tell you if things are happening. So we're seeing a lot more safety side things that are happening as well. So I think when we look at all of this, we're talking about a connected world. And I think everything we look is, consumers are saying they want improved safety. That's what we're talking about in this connected world. It's really important. They want constant connectivity. That's what you're all talking about. You're a consumer, regardless of why you're here today to learn to talk about all this connectivity in a car or whatever. You want enhanced awareness. That's it, right? It's the most important thing that's out there. But I think when I look at this, it doesn't matter where you are. You want it from your home, from your office, from your doctor's office. You want to stay connected. And your car is your hub. The problem with that, or the pros with it, is how do you do it in a safe way? And that way is, how are you going to find a connection that enables you to be safe wherever you are? So that connection with your home is, how do you unlock your door from your car? That's what people want. When they're in the car, they want to be able to know that they can unlock their door on their way home to let their kids in. They want to be able to know they've turned on the lights. They want to be able to know, just like with Nest, that they can turn on their thermostat, but from their car with their app. They want to be able to do all these things. And they even want to do it with a wristwatch now, from their car, that's connected to their car. This is the changing world to which we live, and we're seeing it. Nissan's doing it with their concept watch, and we're seeing it all connected to the car. These are all the things that are happening. And the interesting thing that we wrap all these things up when we talk about, this is the world to which we live in. These are the products that are out there. So there's no more of this disparate system that you're not connected in every part of your life. That's why we call it a connected world. But here's the interesting thing. I want to kind of summarize a little bit, is we have OEMs. Here's the things that they have. These are all the players that have to come together, and here's the challenge. OEMs have an opportunity to create all these new business models, to create upfront revenue, pay-per-use kind of issues. They got some real-time traceability. They've got improved safety for vehicles. That's what's out there. They can create better remote management now. They actually can manage and look at how the cars are working. They actually can look and see things, right? They've got all kinds of field services they've never had before. And I think here's the one that I think the best is they can build a better relationship with their consumer buyer. And they actually have this unique experience with them they've never had before. Car companies have sold a car, the relationship is pretty much over, and they let it go. And then several years you go out and buy another car, but there's been really no relationship with that consumer. With all of this now, with connectivity, there's a long-lasting relationship. So that's what the OEMs have to think about. How about the network operators? Now here's where the connectivity comes in. They have a host of new business models we just talked about. They can bundle subscriptions that they've never had before. They have incremental services that they can keep offering as we have all these apps. they can generate additional revenue, because remember what's happening now to the carriers. It's always been about voice, right? You've had your phone. It no longer is a world about voice. It's all about data. Once Steve Jobs introduced the smartphone, it was all about data. Everything they care about is data. And that all is based on what we all call end-to-end, because end-to-end is always about data. That's what they're talking about. All the data that's in your smartphone, your tablets, that's what they're looking now, your connectivity in your car. So these are all add-on services that they can actually do. That's what's most important to them. So as we go on, beyond with them, now it's you that, what did I do? Okay, sorry about that. Now as the customers, now it's monetary savings. We as the customer can save some money. Because of that relationship, we're not spending so much on all the things because we're all connected all the time. So we also have enhanced productivity because the things we're able to do, staying connected with our home, our fitness, all the things we have, that reduces time and saves us money and productivity. We have improved safety. The idea that the cars are better and safer, and we have this on-the-go experience. We're connected to the cloud. Everything's connected all the time, so we're on the go. And then we talked about green. You know, we're a greener environment. We're thinking consciously about, we have a better green footprint. That's what we want. And then, of course, the one that most people don't think about are the service providers. These are the guys and gals that are providing the platform, the underlying platform that enables all of this to happen. They're getting new service revenues, of course. They have a platform-based service that's managing all the data that goes to and from everything we do. They have that back office integration that they're providing. They're doing all the data management, and they've got all the embedded services and everything we're doing. So I think all of this is really powerful because we never thought of this before. So but the interesting thing is you have 4 different groups that are now interfacing in this connected world that before never did. So now they all have to come together and work together and interface and communicate. That never actually happened, which really says a lot about where we are in this connected world. And I think it's really neat because it kind of points to a new way of things. And I have a quote for you that really is interesting because I talked a lot about Steve Jobs, and he really said it best. In his world, get closer then to your customers. So close that you tell them what they need well before they realize it themselves. He was so right. Think about that. That's what all this group, all 4 of them, have to get to the customer. So it's 3 have to work with the customer and understanding the customer. But here's the biggest thing I want to wrap up. We can talk about all this technology and we can say what goes in the car. Now we have to think about, are we putting too much in the car? Are we putting so much in the car that we are no longer safe? I talk about my radio show a lot, the Peggy Smedley Show, and I do it every Tuesday at 12 noon Central. And I'm very passionate. I have lots of listeners, and they learn about technology every time. And I love technology. I talk about it, I encourage it, but I also talk about using technology wisely. And I think it's important. Every day you use your phone, you walk, you don't pay attention, you walk into other people, and you forget what you're doing. Technology is great if you use it wisely. And at the same time, if we put too much in the car, we put other people at risk. So I leave you with this final little video that I hope you enjoy, but at the same time, you think about the next time you use your phone, the next time you drive in your car, and you think about all of this.
Steve Jobs of automotive technology. I mean, it seems to me there's a whole mishmash of stuff coming out, all the old school Microsoft platform. Would there be an iCar?
You know, I have interviewed some amazing people. I've interviewed, I'll tell you on the distracted driving side, I've spent a lot of time with Ray LaHood, you know, who used to be the Secretary of Transportation. And he was extremely passionate about technology and the benefits of it, yet at the same time how far we have gone and misused technology. He would be one now that I would say probably has a great vision about how we should apply it, not necessarily to use it. I'd also say, you know, Ford is very, you know, the folks at Ford really want a lot of technology. They have a vision of technology over at Ford, not only to put technology in the car, but how to actually use it to be connected to your doctor. They've been working with other medical organizations to actually, like, if you're having, like you need your insulin, you know, so how to be alerted, so your doctor will be alerted. The same way, if you're having a heart attack and you have a pacemaker and you in there, how your doctor will be notified if you're having a heart attack. So they're looking at technology way beyond what you and I just want to be, you know, social media type things. They're really looking at it to take it to the next level, and they've been doing these things for years. So I've been interviewing their engineers that have amazing minds that way. So that's the kind of stuff I think is well beyond what we think on the dashboard. It's those kind of engineers that I've spent time with that I love to interview. It's those folks that are well beyond the face of the company, that are like you guys, that are really the engineers inside the companies that I've interviewed that think really deep. And there's a lot of them. There's same engineers that I've interviewed within GM that are like that, Mercedes. They're in the guts within the company that have great vision. Now, whether any of that comes to life, I don't know, but I've interviewed really great thinkers like that. And there's a lot of them, and I think I don't want anybody to be misled. On the surface, they all come out, and I interview all the executives, and I'll tell you, I've interviewed, you know, Phil Nixon at GM, and all these guys that they come out and they say, oh, you know, and Glenn Lurie at AT&T, you know, he's the top guy that heads up, the president of AT&T, and heads up their mobility group. And they all talk 4G LTE, and that's the best thing, and it's the best thing since apple pie. And it's all great because that's all the consumer hype that they talk about, and that's the big stuff. The really get down to the stuff that you guys get excited about is just what I'm talking about. It's that really stuff that's going to save somebody's life, that's the next really cool patented stuff that really gets me excited, because I think that's really the good stuff. The stuff they want to talk about, when you go out and you ask a consumer, you ask them what they want, they'll say LTE, but they have no idea that LTE is long-term evolution. They have no idea what that means. They just think it means fast, you know? So that's what they hype and that's what they sell. So for me, what gets me excited is what's going to keep us all safe when we're on the road, so that we don't hear this next story that a bus driver is an accident, gets in with a truck, and 12 kids are killed in an accident. You know, that's what I look at the bigger things like that. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the way I think about it. And there's not one key individual.
Hi, Peggy. Eva Lerner-Lamb, president of Palisades Consulting Group, New York and Beijing. I was wondering whether you have any thoughts on the Internet of Things, IoT.
You know, it's always people ask me, the Internet of Things, end-to-end, pervasive Internet, to me, they're all the same. There is no different, because people ask me what it is. To me, we write about my magazine used to be called end-to-end, and to me, it's all connecting technology just to the Internet. All you're now doing it is to the cloud. The idea is it's all about machine data, and the idea is that's what you're doing. The Internet of Things just means your ability to connect it now to the Internet. So when you're talking about all of that, it's really the ability to get data, you're connecting it to the cloud, and you're connecting a server to the cloud. So the Internet of Things is just your ability of capturing all that information.
And the setting of standards for the Internet of Things is happening mainly abroad, not in the United States.
Yeah, they can't seem to get it here. They can't seem to get a group of people that want to get it. They've tried it so many times to do standards, and it's not. And whether it'll happen now, they've done it like on exercise equipment. You know, here we have standards on that, but they can't seem, you know, we have Zigbee and Wi-Fi and things like that, but when it comes to the Internet of Things or M2M, we've just not been able to do that.
An interesting competitive issue, I think, between the
Well, you know, and it's funny that you mentioned that. You know, back in manufacturing days, you know, we had that same problem that they couldn't set standards for years with like Emerson and Fisher Rosemont couldn't do that. And they finally came to terms, but it took them almost 25 years. So maybe that's the same thing we have here.
All this week I've been trying to plant little seeds amongst the attendees to get them to think outside the box, take advantage of the network we're building, and become entrepreneurs. For the most part, engineers work for somebody else. But every once in a while, there's an engineer that breaks out of the box and creates something and then builds something. Some examples include, well, Intel, Apple, Microsoft, General Electric. So I consider you to be an entrepreneur. I've been listening to your podcast for a while and reading your words. What made you become an entrepreneur to create this?
You know, people ask me that. I'm a journalist by trade, and people ask me, how do I know so much about technology? I love the technology. You know, I started in the manufacturing space first, and I've grown up just covering all this technology, and I spend so much time, just like your question about who's like out there, I love talking to companies and learning what they do, and I spend so much time talking to companies. I interview companies every day, and this technology is great. And if there is somebody out there who wants to start a company, do it. That's why I'm saying we're doing these pitch challenges, so that they can meet an investor. Because we spend that. I'm even working with universities, inviting them because a grad student or an undergrad to do it, because that's the best idea comes out of it. My son right now is a freshman in college, and he's in programming, and he's just developed his own web game, you know, computer programming game, and he's the same way. The idea is if you love it, you want to do it, because this is the time. The technology is the best it's ever been, and the ideas are out there. And there's so many investors who want. I have about 40-some thousand followers on Twitter, and a huge portion of them are investors. And the investors want that young, great idea, because this is the time. So the reason I like writing and having people follow and learn the technology and why I do the radio show is because it's fun. And I have a lot of people who've said they've started their companies by following and reading what we do in the magazine. So it's a great time. If you have the idea, go for it, because that's how you get it going.
Okay, last chance for a question or two.
Thank you again.